Brandon, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. How are you, Chris?
Doing awesome.
Busy,
So, what's that?
busy day.
Yeah, me too. Um, yeah, but not so busy that we're not gonna get into our topic and make a podcast
Yes.
for this month, one of two for the month.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
today,
Always can make time for that.
right. And today we're going to talk about how to build simple business processes that fit your company, not just business processes, but business processes that fit your company. Ready to go?
I'm I'm very ready to go.
Okay,
Very applicable topic to what I actually am doing currently.
excellent. Well, let me go ahead and intro the episode. So, well, first, the podcast. This is the video. The Talk Ops podcast is a video podcast for business owners ready to organize. So, we're always talking about organization. Whether you're growing, selling, or handing off your business, it takes order. And Brandon and Chris, you and me, are
Hmm.
here to discuss everything related to organizing, accountability, and all the things that help you grow, sell, or even take a vacation from your business. And we're your hosts, Brandon and Chris. Say hi,
Hey,
Brandon.
hi guys.
All right. So today, this topic is how to build simple business processes that fit your company, and just kind of frame it up. Business processes are different for every company. There's no two situations that are really completely identical. Sure, there are best practices you can use to get everything started, but the chances of best practices working for your company in your town with your culture, with your employees, with your, you know, cat, your wife, your,
Yeah.
all these things, like, they seem small, but bigger things, they change everything. Even the small things have an effect. So how do you organize a business with processes when there's no perfect template to follow? You can't just go online and say what's the way to do this, and then your business is created for you, right?
Yeah, that's a tricky one.
It's a tricky one. It can feel tricky, but I think
Yes,
we're going to simplify it.
I think so.
So, Brandon, let me ask you, what is a fun thing you tried that should have totally worked but totally flopped? Should have totally worked on paper. Maybe someone was like, "Oh, you would like this," and you just didn't like it. You're like, "Yeah, I don't know why. I'm just not enthusiastic about it," or something that just didn't quite, like, on paper it seemed to work, but just didn't.
Um, I'd say the thing that off the top of my head, not to say I wouldn't do it again, but it was actually paintballing. Um, I've been invited twice to paintballing, and in my head, I'm like, "Oh, this is gonna be so much fun, running through the woods and shooting people and stuff like that." And then when I actually got out there, like I froze in place because I was so nervous of getting shot, and then you get lit up and it hurts, and it's like that was not what I had built that up to be in my head. I thought that was gonna be like Rambo and stuff and army crawling through the woods, and instead I laid in a ditch for like 20 minutes waiting for the siren to go off and try to peg anyone who came by, but didn't want to really move too much. And
Yeah.
I would go again, but it was not what I had originally built it up in my head to be.
Things like that. Sometimes I think they should, like, go over some stuff, or we should practice, or we should develop a philosophy of, like, how do we do this? Because there are guys
Yes.
who run and gun, and there are guys who live through it.
Yep. Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
there's that saying, that old Russian saying I heard, even bullets fear the brave, you know? And so,
Hmm.
like, there's a way. It's just that you have to know that before you go into it. You can't just go into it like, you know, it's like I just remember playing soccer, and I always felt confident because I knew what I was supposed to. I knew what I wanted to do out there, and I went out.
Yeah.
But if you've never played before and you get out there and you're like, oh, okay, well, what's the best thing to do? Should I pass it backward? You don't have a style, you don't have an approach, you don't have a philosophy of how you're going to
Yeah.
do it. And then it's just like, dude, it's too easy just to get destroyed.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was half my problem was it was like a business retreat thing. So I mean,
Uh,
this is like 30 people, 40 people who have never done it before. No
uh,
one has any strategy, no idea what they're doing. I've never shot a gun before. I don't know what to expect, like anything, no strategies, and you don't want to mess it up. You don't want to shoot one of your own teammates on accident because you're like, how do you even like tell which players on which team? Because that's not always clear and obvious. And I just went into it so confused that I think, to your point, if I would have had a good, clear strategy and we knew what we were doing and maybe even practice on like a gun range beforehand or something, I could have probably gone in there a lot more confident, but
or even
just ended
some
up being
YouTube
fearful.
videos about just like here's how to attack. Here's like a good basic way to attack. Like when you're playing chess, you want to know
Yeah.
good basic opening moves, or whatever, and yeah, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, mine was I just remember I just remember playing hockey, and there was this team that was kind of like they were excited, enthusiastic, and they were from another town, and they came in and they had set up this game with us, and we were kind of like the second team in our league, kind of like JV is kind of like what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but we're still expected to win, because these guys were like, they just ragtag. And
Yeah.
dude, they came in and we were arrogant. I think we were just arrogant. I think even though we didn't act like rude, but we were arrogant though. In our hearts, I think we just kind of had like this, I don't know, thought we are just we had to beat these guys. So there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of arrogance. And then when we were tying, like when we were just tying with them, um, I think the pressure started mounting and we started feeling like, oh no, we're supposed to win and we're not winning. Like that we're supposed to
Mm-hmm.
make this look easy and it's not easy. And so we ended up going to a shootout and like I messed up my shot, and it was the worst game I played. It just kind of felt like it was like another person playing. But
Yeah.
on paper, we're totally supposed to win. And in reality, we just totally got embarrassed. And the reason I chose this question, it kind of relates, it's kind of an icebreaker, kind of relates, is because no two situations are ever the same. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's like
Yeah.
my attitude was different in that situation. You know, um, and like your situation, you're entering a totally new thing.
Yeah.
In my situation, it wasn't so new. It was more like the team we were playing was new. Our attitudes were different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there was a lot. We had home ice, and it was like, but it was just still like it was just awkward,
Yeah.
like a lot of things changed and made it awkward that you couldn't put on paper. A lot of X factors, that were
Yes. Yes. I had the same experience in football. We
yeah,
Our varsity team basically went and played JV because we didn't have enough guys to field two teams. So we were a varsity team going in to play a JV team basically. And yeah, we didn't win. And it's kind of the same thing. That was just like, wow, that really did not go how we thought that was going to go.
yeah,
But
yeah,
yep.
totally. Yeah, and a lot of that's leadership and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There's just a lot that goes into that, but I think part of that is like just realizing it's okay if you don't it's okay if the situation doesn't go exactly as planned.
Yeah.
Nothing does really, like we think it does because we're playing sports and everything's working out and everything. Normally we can predict some things, but it's just like having a business. You'd have a couple of businesses that are exactly the same and the same, like
Mm-hmm.
they do kind of the same thing, the same service, but they're vastly different. One's a
Yeah.
little smaller, more nimble. They have to take advantage of that maybe. I don't know, what are some other things that make
Yeah.
businesses.
Well, I think the biggest thing, well, at least for me, is you're right. Different situations, they're not always going to work out right. But the biggest key that is consistent through all of it is that you learn from it because you're going to try something, it is going to flop. And then if you can at least take some learnings to it from it, you can then use those learnings to refine the process. You can make it more streamlined for your business. And I might be jumping ahead a little bit. But that's one of the ways of tailoring a process for your business, is refining it based on learning off of previous attempts and continuing to fine tune it for your company. So I might have jumped
Yeah,
too
you
far
basically
ahead.
answered the whole podcast. That's okay.
Pretty much.
Well, let's get into it though. Let's get into it. What do you, let's talk about simple processes, right? Like where do
Hmm.
you, like um why simple processes and not complex processes? Like what do you what do they do for your company? Like a simple process. Like
Well,
why
in
a
my
simple
mind, they
what
do
would
a
work?
couple different things. One, very easy for people to understand. Obviously, the simpler it is, the easier to pick up. So if you're turning over a lot of staff, or you have some kind of industry where you do have a lot of turnover, having a simple process allows you to be able to retrain or train new employees quicker. McDonald's is a great example of it. And I know they're a very big organization, but if you've ever worked at a McDonald's, their process for making a French fry and things like that, very, very simple, that you can bring anybody in, even middle schoolers and stuff, train them in about 20 minutes and they're making the perfect McDonald's French fry. So it's really easy for training purposes if it's simple. Um, and you're not wasting a lot of time on minutia of things that really aren't that helpful for your business. Um, Again, I don't want to jump too far out of order, but I know personally we've had processes that were really complicated, and then we spend our whole time trying to manage that process, and then that's time away from selling, or it's time away from fixing something else, or looking at our books or whatever, and then other balls start getting dropped because you're so wrapped up in a overly complicated process that you sometimes just need a simple one to get you through until you can make it more complex or have more variables to it. But at the
Yeah.
end of the day, you do want to simplify as far as you can.
Yeah, and I would add that, just like you touched on it, but hiring, I just remember talking with somebody at a place I worked, and he was like, yeah, we need to look for that person who does this and this. And I'm like, I don't think so. Like the person who is the strategist and the designer, like that's going to be a hard person to find. Like I would rather
Hmm.
hire a contractor to do part of that role and a contractor do the other part, and then just have someone doing in the middle doing strategy, making sure it all makes sense together, than to hire a strategist slash copywriter slash designer or whatever. It's just
Yeah.
so rare. It's like I don't know any designers who are awesome copywriters, and I don't know any copywriters who are awesome designers. And I think I've seen a lot of arrogant people be like, I just remember one agency I worked for, they were like, yeah, all our account executives write. And I'm like, well, yeah, everybody can write, probably who works for you, right? Like everybody knows how to write letters.
Hmm.
But it's like they suck at writing. I can tell you that right now because I've seen some of their crap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's just you know, like if you want really good stuff, you have to. So that's where the process and the person fit. You want a process that you can plug in a simple, kind of like the McDonald's example. Only I think with a lot of companies, you need a little higher skill level than that. You want someone coming in with some, like, let's say, like in my domain, you're hiring a designer or a writer. You want them to come in showing that they can do the kind of writing and the kind of design that you want, and then
Yeah.
you want them to be professional and have a minimum level of experience to where they can plug into the process. And then the process starts not from zero. The process starts from like, okay, we have a designer who knows how to use Illustrator, Photoshop, InDesign, whatever. And then
Hmm.
um, we're not going to teach them that. We're going to ask them that in the interview and make sure they already know. But once they come in, they already have a little bit of experience. They already understand the best practices. And then you say, okay, here's how we do it here. Here's the process. And they're like, I already know. Yeah, yes, I've never worked in that process before, but I already know why it works because I understand how the design process works.
Hmm.
And so and that person's easy to find, right? A designer who does that is easy to find. And so what's hard to find is a designer who's working with exactly your stack, with exactly your, like, you start adding like specifics, and that becomes a lot harder to find. And if you don't want to provide that process that can meet them at that place, you don't want to
Yeah.
write a process. Now you have to find someone who already knows your company. No, you don't want to do that. You want
Yep.
a process that brings it down to where you can find a lot of people who can fill it. Then you
Yep.
find the people who can fill it, and it's easy and it's cheap, and it happens
Hmm.
every time. Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yes, exactly.
yeah, so I think maybe the answer to that question, tell me if we're summing it up right, but what do simple processes mean for your company? Well, the simplicity means that it's cheap and easy, and it's just, and you get consistency.
Yeah, I would agree.
You agree? Okay. All right. So the next question, we really have two main questions that I wrote, and then the next question has a couple of follow-up questions I think that will make the conversation good. How do you start? How do you start organizing? So let me set the stage, Brandon. Let's set the stage. So you have a company, you've been going for like 20, 30, 40 years, I don't know, maybe 5 years. But really, let's talk about like more of a mature company,
Hmm.
because that's kind of who we're talking to, right? We're like, how
Yep.
do you get ready to sell in 5 years? How do you maximize your value of your company
Hmm.
in 5 years or 3 years or whatever?
Yep.
So that in mind, let's say you're that far into it and you're like, man, I'm needed too much in my company. I can't really grow. I can't figure out how to grow. Oh, I just can't find good employees, man. You just can't find good employees these days, right?
Hmm.
Or everybody who comes in does it differently.
Yep.
Well, let's add. Is there anything else we need? Any problems we can frame up before we get into the question? Inconsistent.
Um,
I'm inconsistent. Inconsistent results.
yeah. Yeah.
Hit and miss whether we serve clients well or not. They customers well.
Yeah, whether we're hitting deadlines or not, and whether we're hitting budgets or not, and yeah, are we profitable each month or not? And you can go through a lot of different things, and I think consistency is the big one. It's just, are you
it's the
consistently
spending.
turning up?
Yeah, the spending on the work we do, is it going like this too much month to month?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So efficiency changes, all that. All right.
Hmm.
So that's where you're at as a company, right? Oh, you lose somebody, you lose an employee or something, and now it's just like everything has to go on hold while we figure this out, right? You
Yeah.
don't know how to handle that. It's just tough, and it's hard to. Everything's disruptive, right?
Hmm.
All right. So if you're in that situation, then how do you start? How do you start organizing?
So the way I start organizing, I mean, number one, we laid out a lot of different problems that you could be facing. You have to find your pain point. I mean, what is that? Maybe you have multiple issues, but maybe it's just one of them. We can't hire consistently, or our spending isn't consistent, and it's just one issue. You got to first um describe the problem, write it down, understand it, why is it a problem, and make sure you have the root cause of it. Not, we can't have good employees, and lo and behold, the root cause is actually because you have a bad manager who, you can have this huge turnover. It's not that you can't hire good employees, you actually have a bad manager. So you got to make sure you have the root cause of the problem. um so first, frame that up. Once you have that, then I always like to start by just taking inventory of what resources I've got available, whether it's personnel, whether it's budget, whether it's time, um, because those are going to be your constraints around what kind of process can I build to solve that problem. Because it'd be great. Yeah, if I had $1 million, I could do this. Well, problem is my budget's only 100,000, so I guess that process rules itself out because of constraints.
What if like let's take it even from the top. Like what if you're like, you don't know where to start, man. Like, you have problems. Where do you start? Like what's the highest question you could really be asking, that kind of like what's the fundamental place to start where you're like, I don't know where to start. I I need some place to like I know you and I have the sniffer, right? Like we can probably like chat with you. And, in fact, if you have a problem like this and you're listening, like, let's have you as a guest. We'll talk it through. We'll workshop it, and we'll put it up as a podcast, right? But let's say you're like you don't know where to start. Where do you start? Like, I have a guess. Well,
I'd be curious
by
to hear yours.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna throw this by you. I'm gonna see what you think.
Okay.
So the way I think best, it's I got to keep things simple, because I'm not like as systematic as I think I am. I also don't want to keep a bunch of information in my head at once without understanding why first, right? So I want to know, if I'm a business, I'm gonna want to say, like, okay, how's profitability? I'm gonna start there, because that's the highest thing I can figure out, right? The most basic thing I can figure out. Oh, profitability is this. Play with it a little. It's going like this. Why is it going like that? Okay, so now you have a why. Now you have a question. You start asking questions, and you say, okay, because I'm a big fan of, like, do you have a staff or do you not have a staff? And there's a difference there. If you have a staff, now you might have three people. You might have someone who handles marketing, someone who handles, ops, someone who handles sales, or maybe you're the ops guy or whatever. But now it's like, okay, let's start asking questions about where is this coming from? Try to locate that. Take a guess. If you can take a guess at it, and then you can start, like, creating a working hypothesis, just kind of a guess, develop that guess out, and then say, how would I know if that is the problem or not? How would I test that, right? So now you have a place to start working. But I think there's a problem there, though, because a lot of us, we're running a business, we don't have time to stop and think. And if we think, we're so action oriented, we don't know how to slow down and start asking these, philosophical questions about our business, but that really are important. Like, if you can't do the philosophy a little bit, you can't grow your business. And so you need to be able to kind of model things in your head. And sometimes that only happens when we have people to help us, and if you don't have staff, if you have staff that's smart and they're resourceful, they know their department, they know their role, man, start there, But if you don't, that's when you need to go out and talk to somebody. You need to talk to a mentor, maybe someone who is, like, about to retire, or someone who from another market, another part of the country, who's willing to talk to you and talk these things through with you. And the other thing is, you could talk to a consultant, maybe someone who isn't exactly from that same industry. Maybe the consultant is from that same industry. But they have to be able to stop and listen to you for a little while, because you got to watch out for these consultants that, like, come in like, I'm going to show you how to do it, like the big, company or whatever. It's like, dude, we just said every company is different, You don't necessarily want someone like that who's just going to come in and tell you what to do instead of listening to what's going on the ground. They need to understand you. They need to understand your problem, because you're the leader and you're not going to change. So they need to be able to work with you, and then they need to be able to understand, some things and sorts of out. So I would say take it from the top, start kind of going down. If you don't know how to ask those questions, you need to find someone who can talk
and I guess
through with you.
Yes, I agree with that. I was starting more from the assumption that you know where the problems are.
Right.
Because, like, if it's hiring, you might not see that actually reflect in the profitability. You might, depending on how costly that person is, or how much the churn is, and if you got a huge line item for new hires because you keep rehiring, then yes, it could reflect in the profitability. But there's certain problems you might not find from a balance sheet or a cash flow statement or something.
You're not going to see it in it. You're going to follow it down to it. So that's what it is. Like, I think if you know the problem, like, if you know every time we lose someone, it's a headache. Well, now it's time to, like, say, well, why? Right. But you always ask why. And if you don't know, like, start from the top, start from that profitability. because you're going to eventually go to that hiring if you start going down profitability and start saying, why are we not profitable? Why, what changed when we started becoming unprofitable? Well, what changed? Well, we changed our marketing, we changed this. Oh, and we lost somebody. And you're going to be like,
hmm
well, yeah, it's because we lost somebody, So what I'm saying is, if you don't know where to start, if you don't know, like, if you don't
Yeah.
have these major pain points that you can solve, um, start from the top, because you're going to get to the pain points. The thing about starting from the top is you're going to be objective. So, like,
hmm
the hiring problem may be a headache, but it may not be your biggest cost problem. You may be able
hmm
to deal with that. There may be a bigger thing that's in there somewhere, and you're going to find that if you go top down, you're going to be able to say,
Yeah.
okay, it's easier from top down to prioritize, like, what actually is costing us, money. Uh,
hmm
but I would also argue that you're right, Brandon. I think that is, if you go into it and you're like, look, every time we hire someone, it's a huge freaking headache. You're
hmm
probably going to see that in your profitability. You're
Yeah.
going to see that headache. Everybody stops, morale like just like
Yep.
dies down, and nothing like exciting happens until you get that, that,
Yeah.
because everybody's just like burning the midnight oil, no extra time to, so yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the answer is, like, depending on where you are. Like, do you know a few problems that,
hmm
yeah, but you're still asking why in every situation. You're still asking, well, why is that a problem?
Yeah. And one little, if you want to call it a pro tip, I would add to it. Um, try not just be objective about it, be humble and not attached to anything in your business, because that can create blind spots where problems hide.
So
Because
say that one more time.
yep. So I said it's not just looking at your business objectively,
Oh,
but it's looking honestly, and attach don't be attached to anything in your business more than you need to be, because those are the places where problems tend to hide, and they're very hard to find.
so what do you mean?
Um,
Like, give me an example of attached to a part of your business.
so in what I have seen in a couple of organizations, it's come in a lot of different shapes and forms, but one of them was some individuals who thought they are very good at a certain task. So the assumption is always made, this is not a problem because we have this person in place who's very, very good at what they do. And then you just keep going on with this same assumption because that individual's pride is, I'm the best at this. And they couldn't be objective and say, maybe it is my fault. Maybe it's because of this. And then once you dissect it and you say, okay, let's just use the assumption you're bad at this. What does that actually mean to the organization? And it's like, wow, we have a huge hole in our organization now because whatever role they were supposed to be filling, they weren't filling it appropriately. But it was all because they couldn't look at the business objectively, or they couldn't take an honest assessment of
Yeah,
themselves or the company.
yeah,
And there was a huge hole that wasn't being filled. You could see from like a P&L or a balance sheet or something that the company's not doing well, or the organization's not doing well. And it's like, why are our numbers down? Well, because of this, this, and this. Well, that can't be the reason, because this person's really good at what they do. So that can't be the problem. So you keep
yeah.
masking the problem because someone couldn't be objective, honest, and they let their pride just get in the way. And when
So,
you
like,
hold things too tight,
yeah.
it creates those blind spots. So be honest about it. It's a pro tip to try to stay as honest and objective as you can while you're doing it.
Yeah, well, and it's like, an example I can think of is when, oh, we hired someone from so and so company, big company, and they're
Yep.
coming in and they're going to help us out, and they were really good at that company. Well, it's like, first of all, we don't know that it wasn't because of their lieutenant, whoever was helping them, that they were successful. We don't know
Yep.
if it was because of the company's situation. They came in at just the right time that things were ready to go. Their predecessor. The other thing too is that they may be really good, and you hired a really good person, but if they're not humble, they may be like not wanting to hear any kind of advice. They may not want to learn. They may want to, and they may be great at it, and they just need to hear a few things. They just need to test a few things, maybe be challenged or coached a little bit. Maybe they're coming from a different industry and they have this awesome, fresh perspective. And yet, if they're not humble, they're not going to learn about the industry because they're going to rely too much on, like, well, I want to be fresh, right? I want to have a
Yeah.
fresh perspective. And it's like the experience will help them. And also maybe a little patience and coaching could really help them. They may even be a great fit, but if they're not humble, we're never going to realize the advantage of that fit.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's not even just in the hiring either. I mean, it could be a supplier. Like, hey, we're using my brother-in-law as our supplier. He's giving us the best price possible, but we can't figure out why we're not profitable. Well, maybe our supply cost is too high. And when you actually shop it around, it's like, wow, we're actually not getting that great of a deal.
Yeah.
But I held on to the supplier because it's family or whatever. And you weren't looking at it objectively. And your cost of goods sold were through the roof or something like that. And you didn't even realize it. So it's just looking at everything objectively.
When we started with them, they were the best value. And
Yeah, they could have very well been.
Changed now. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So I don't know what you think, Brandon. Should we wrap it up? I think we already covered the last thing I was going to talk about was measurement. Maybe I'll just summarize that real quick. Um, I don't know. So my point was, I think it was really important to use measurement to create some of that objectivity. Again, the thing about measurement is not everything important is measurable. And so just because it's measurable doesn't mean it's important. Just because it's important doesn't mean it's measurable. And so we take that like lightly. You have to just kind of you need experience and judgment, but how do you get that is you start measuring. And then you start making decisions. And you start seeing how it works together, right? And so I was talking with somebody recently, and I was like, hey, I know this is the perfect measure, but I was asking for his help, right, to help me develop measurements. I know this isn't the perfect measure, but we need to measure something, because if we measure something and you get frustrated with how we're measuring it, you're going to suggest something better for us to measure you on, right? And and I was direct about it. And then but the other thing is, again, just kind of going from the top and just taking that objectivity and just saying, okay, well, are we profitable or not? Well, if we're profitable, you might want to say, how do we get more profitable? In fact, you do want to say that. And so you want to start saying, okay, well then, are we not making enough? Are we spending too much? Right. And so you start, basically what you're doing is you're just tracking everything down and breaking it down into its component parts until you start to have just like, and I would say keep it really basic too. Like for me, like I said, I'm a simple guy. I just want simple numbers. Let's realize that the company is its own. Let's start from the top, keep it simple, and let's learn the company as we go, and not be afraid to just say, hey, I don't understand what Google Analytics has to do with profitability right now, right? If you don't understand that, ask somebody why. If they can't tell you and it doesn't like make sense to the bottom line for you, well then just say, well, I don't care right now about it. I don't care. Don't tell me about it. I don't pollute my brain with it right now. Let's go with a number that's a little more meta, right? A little higher level than that, to a point where I actually understand what it has to do with the bottom line. And then let's build our questions downward, and let's keep building those questions downward till we really understand our company. And again, this isn't perfect. Everything, like I said, you're not going to be able to measure everything perfectly. But I think this is how you start to understand your business from an objective standpoint. And then you use your experience and the experience of others to talk about why those measures are the way they are. And then I'm gonna open it up for a second. I want to talk to
I was gonna say I'll keep it quick, but that was actually going to be one of my other little inputs. I'm a numbers guy, and that is, when in doubt, I will overanalyze something. And I get so lost in the weeds and overcomplicate it, and then you can't explain it to somebody. I get it because I'm a numbers guy, but the leadership doesn't always get it. And that is the place where a process can generally, for me, run into the ditch. I make it overly complicated because I'm trying to measure every little step of it. And sometimes you don't need that. Just a quick example, company I work for, we have a phone system that you can track the calls and how many calls each person's picking up, and because each person's got their own phone number and so on. I was spending like 3 weeks trying to come up with this perfect measurement dashboard that get a drop rate for each person and what kind of calls were they getting and all this kind of stuff. And finally, leadership was just like, okay, just stop. Just give us, as an organization wide, how many calls are we missing, how many we're picking up. And that's all we've been tracking for the last 4 or 5 months, is just organizational wide. We have 60 calls come in each day. We pick up 45 of them. That's it.
But
Don't
then
worry about person by person.
yeah, but then guess what's going to happen as soon as they start asking questions about like the effectiveness of salespeople? Now they're going to say, "Hey, let's build that number out." But it starts with a question they have from the top,
Yep.
not from what I want to give them. And I have that same problem, Brandon, because
Yep.
like, I'm the same way. And so, but yeah, and so the other thing I just wanted to mention too, a SWOT analysis is a great tool to start to understand your business, and so with your measurements, a SWOT analysis will help you understand, like, hey, are there some weaknesses that we have? Like, should we get better at those weaknesses? Or, the other option is, should we just nullify them and just don't offer them, right?
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of things. You can break the rules. Like, you don't have to be you don't have to be like, if you're doing a particular, I don't know, business, you don't have to be good at everything that everybody's traditionally good at in that business. You may be
Yep.
able to offer something really cool that's really specific. But all that's just getting to know your business, your culture, and your leadership,
Mhm.
what you actually want to provide. And then we'll talk about that in the next podcast a little bit, because we're going to talk about values and stuff, and we're going to go
Yep.
actually part of it. So last words, Brandon, before we close.
Just make it as simple as you can.
Yeah.
Helps for hiring, and you
Yeah.
don't get bogged down in the weeds, and it'll allow you, going back to a previous podcast, gives you more time to work on your business rather than in your business, because you're not in the weeds so much. So make it simple so you can focus on the big picture rather than all the little things.
You absolutely couldn't say it better. Well, Brandon, this has been another episode of the Talk Ups podcast with
Been
Brandon,
fun.
where we encourage business owners to vacation without worrying. Organize their business to get more money at sale. we
Yep.
vacationing as well. Help your kids succeed if you're handing it off to them, or just take a vacation without worrying about what's going on back at the office. Please comment, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and we'd love your comments and questions. Got a suggestion for another topic? Put it in the comments. Do you have a business and you want us to workshop it with you? Let's talk and see if it's a good fit for the podcast, because that would be super duper fun. Thank you all so much for joining us. We'll talk to you next time.
Yep. See ya.